Christmas. So people are kind of giving something that has a bit more of a substance under the tree this year.
For the benefit of New Zealanders, because one of the slogans is about changing Australia Day, why do you want to change the date of Australia Day? That's on your cans.
Yeah, so we feel that, for First Nations people, Australia Day marks a day of, invasion and dispossession, not a day that they would like to celebrate. And we, our team as Australians feel that we should be creating a date that everybody can celebrate. And so we don't want to lose the date. We don't want to stop the party from happening, but we just want to change it by one day to a day that we can all be a part of.
It'll be fascinating to see if socially conscious beer takes off. I mean, social conscience.
I think it's the time. I mean, the millennial generation is really plugged in, and I think we vote with our dollars. We see that our dollars can make a real difference in the world. So we hope that people would support us, and we can all drink to a better future.
Sarah, thank you. All the best. Sarah Barrable-Tishau joining us from Spark. Someone says the message is needed earlier than just for beer drinkers later, maybe on soft drinks. I think that company makes soft drinks as well.
That's a good point.
The other thing I wanted to mention about beer is that Crate Day, this new method of celebrating the first day of summer, and its possible unintended consequence turning New Zealand into Wowzerland. After 300 people left Queenstown's village green a right mess while celebrating Crate Day, there's now a clamour for tighter restrictions on public drinking, and the Otago Lakes Area Commander of Police wants a meeting with the Queenstown's Lakes District Council later this week. And up for discussion as a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week liquor ban. Would you be in favour of that? Are you sick of public drinking spectacles, the kind of mess that they left in Queenstown, please?
Yeah, it's typical, isn't it? A small group of people who are ruining it for everybody else. That's my view on these things. The second thing is I probably wouldn't be because, again, it impacts negatively on those, what would we call them, those innocent people who are actually going out to enjoy themselves with their friends and family, and then you have a bunch of idiots who ruin it later on in the evening or later on in the night.
It's hard to get rid of the bunch of idiots, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we're surrounded by a bunch of idiots, aren't we? So we can't sort of carve them out, But it's unfortunate you can't put a blanket approach on these things, and also after one mess up, you can't sort of take a hammer to try and deal with the nut.
No, but the ED doctors are talking again, I notice, about the quantifiable damage to society with every hour that pubs stay open, Jess, in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder about this whole, it's a small group of people who ruin it for the rest of us. And when you look at the data, it's, we have a pretty consistent, poor record of public drinking and harm done to a lot of people in this country. So I actually wonder if our view of, most of us being responsible drinkers needs a little bit of a reassessment, actually.
Thank you both. That's all we've got time for. And among our interesting topics today, and the very interesting discussion from both of you, Peter Whaaviu, Whaafatai, thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Jess.
Yeah, you too, if we don't see you. And Jess Berenson-Shaw on the panel as well. Thank you so much, Jess.
Thanks very much, Jim.
Thank you, everybody. We're back tomorrow with the panel, and Checkpoint with John Campbell is on the way.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, 3 gnats in a hat. A three-way race is underway for the National Party leadership, and the contenders Judith Collins, Bill English and Jonathan Coleman join us live on the program, one after the other, to tell us why they should be the country's next Prime Minister. All of that coming up in the first half hour. Lots on the leadership contest tonight. Also, a 91-year-old woman is attacked in her home for $50 and a comb. The death toll rises to 36 after that fire at a makeshift nightclub in Oakland, and 13,000 juvenile salmon suffocated when someone broke into the hatchery they were in and switched off the machinery. All of that and more coming up after the news.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. No mai, hi to my good afternoon. I'm Paul Brennan. National Party MPs will choose between 3 senior cabinet ministers for their new leader next Monday, along with anyone else who might throw their hat in the ring before then. Bill English, Jonathan Coleman and Judith Collins have today all declared their intention of standing. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Bill English already has the public backing of 8 other ministers, including the outgoing Prime Minister, John Key. Ms Collins says the party needs a tough leader who can connect with a broad range of New Zealanders and win next year's election. Dr Coleman says he has experience outside the world of Parliament and is looking to rejuvenate the party. He has named Amy Adams as one MP he could work with as deputy. Ms Adams has ruled herself out of the leadership race but is leaving the door open for deputy. Other possible deputies include Paula Bennett and Simon Bridges. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
Parliament has gone into urgent debate on Mr Key's resignation. The debate was requested by the New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters and granted by the Speaker David Carter, who dismissed an objection from the National Minister Jerry Brownlee. Mr Brownlee said Mr Key had yet to formally resign, but Mr Carter said the announcement had been made. Mr Peters started by telling the House that families have suffered under Mr Key and it's wrong to say the country is better off.
And when those people say, be generous, he's retiring, I want them to look at that homelessness, those people out of work, in despair, no chance in this country's future, in poor families, and ask what would they think.
Winston Peters of New Zealand First. The Ministry of Social Development has been convicted of breaching workplace safety legislation, but no further penalty has been imposed on it. The charge brought by WorkSafe in the Wellington District Court followed the fatal shooting of 2 work and income staff members at the Ministry's Ashburton office in 2014. Earlier this year, the Chief District Court Judge, Jean-Marie Doug, ruled barriers should have been in place to protect staff. She also said there was no causal link between the Ministry's breach and the shootings, as there would have been no way of predicting them. Judge Doug said today she could not impose a fine because the defendant was a Crown organisation, but had it been possible, she would have fined it $16,000. The Transport Agency says crews working on State Highway 1 south of Kaikoura have cleared more than half of the 25 slips created by last month's earthquakes. It says it's cleared 13 and is making good progress on the 14th and 15th, the 2 biggest. Its Regional Performance Manager Pete Connors says it's aiming to restore controlled single-lane access for residents and essential services by the middle of this month, depending on the weather and any further quakes. The daughter of a 91-year-old woman attacked by 2 men in Auckland yesterday say they are cowards and lowlifes. A man pushed Eileen Harwood to the floor inside her Mount Wellington home after he and another man had asked her for directions at the door. Her daughter, Sue Tutt, says the men then walked inside.
And Mum came over and she said, "What the hell are you doing?" or something like that. I can't, yeah, it all happened so quick. And the next minute he just went like that and pushed her and she fell on her back. And she was like unconscious.
Sue Tutt says her mother suffered a head injury and spent the night in hospital. The police say they're looking for a male who could be as young as 15 and a man in his late 20s. A judge in the American state of South Carolina has declared a mistrial in a high-profile case involving a white police officer who shot dead an unarmed black motorist. Jurors said they were unable to reach a verdict after 4 days of deliberation. The BBC's David Willis has this report.
The police officer, Michael Slager, was sacked after video footage emerged of him shooting 50-year-old Walter Scott 5 times in the back in April last year. Mr. Scott had been pulled over by the officer for having a broken back light, but then struggled with him and fled. Mr. Scott's family said he might have been worried about going to jail because he owed money for child support. The footage was widely viewed on both broadcast and social media and fuelled the ongoing debate here about the treatment of black citizens by white police officers.
David Willis reporting there. It's 4.5 minutes past 5. To sport now, and the second cricket ODI between Australia and New Zealand is underway in Canberra. New Zealand won the toss and put Australia in. A short time ago, they were 30 without loss after 6 overs. The team batting first at Manuka Oval has won every one-dayer since 2013. The Black Caps must win to keep the 3-game Chappell-Hadley series alive. The Phoenix captain Andrew Durante says the players must take the blame for the departure of coach Ernie Merrick, who announced his shock departure yesterday after 3.5 years in the job. An emotional Durante says Merrick always had the club's best interest at heart.
We have to accept that we are responsible for this. It's sad. He's been a great coach, a great role model for me, great mentor, and we let him down.
Andrew Durante. The Phoenix management intend announcing a permanent replacement for Merrick before Christmas. Just a couple of months after signing on for 4 more years, the New Zealand men's hockey coach Colin Batch is set to step down. His good friend Ernie Merrick let the news slip at a news conference this afternoon while talking about his decision to resign as Phoenix coach. Batch, who played 175 tests for Australia, is believed to be taking up a coaching role with Australian hockey, according to Merrick. He's been in charge of the Black Sticks for the past 4 years. And that's the news.
An opposition boost.
I knew that the landscape had changed, for sure, and irrespective of who is there for the National Party next year, the fight will be the same.
A brash assessment.
Indeed, he's done almost nothing of a major significance in the 8 years. I asked my National Party friends, what has he done in 8 years that Helen Clark would not have done? And they struggle.
No tears shed.
John Key has been a great leader for the rich, but I doubt that those living in Carter's caravan parks and cold, damp houses will be shedding a tear anytime soon.
Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy Espiner, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the battle for Aleppo. Barak Barfi, who has met the president, tells us why Assad is winning. And after 10, All Blacks mental guru Kerry Evans on giving athletes the psychological edge. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather now. The short forecast for New Zealand through to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday. Northland through to Waitomo and Taupo, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Long fine spells, isolated showers, mainly during the afternoon and evenings. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly fine. High cloud increasing tomorrow. Taranaki through to Wellington. That includes Taihape and Wairarapa. Fine spells today, scattered showers about the ranges, cloud increasing tomorrow and rain developing in the evening tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, fine for the rest of today, high clouds, scattered rain tomorrow. Heavy in the west later tomorrow. Canterbury, high cloud, a few spots of rain there. Rain becomes widespread and heavy about the high country tomorrow. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain or drizzle today. Rain becomes heavy tomorrow. Otago and Southland, mostly cloudy, a few showers turning to widespread rain for a time tomorrow. At the Chatham Islands, fine for the rest of today. It'll cloudy up a bit tomorrow. It is 8 minutes past 5.
Today is a day that I've made a tough decision, and that's that I will be putting my name forward for the election ballot on Monday.
It's very clear that there is an appetite for a contest between candidates, and I have informed the caucus that I will be putting my name forward for the leadership next Monday.
I'm announcing today that I will be a candidate for the leadership of the National Party.
Judith Collins, Jonathan Coleman and Bill English, unless there are surprises yet to be had, and I guess that's possible. One of them will be Prime Minister in less than a week. They all join us live tonight. Welcome, everyone. We begin with Judith Collins, Papakura MP. She first entered Parliament in 2002 in the Clevedon electorate. She's now Minister of Corrections and Minister of Police. At 57, she is oldest of the three, although all are in their 50s. Formerly a lawyer with Simpson Grierson, she has a Master's in Law and she was youngest ever President of the Auckland District Law Society. Welcome, Minister. Are you there?
Oh, I am. Yes, I am, John.
Why do you want the job?
Because I think I can do the best job going into the 2017 election.
And what will be best about it?
Well, because it's going to be a tough election. I think what we've faced so far has been tough, but nothing like we're going to face in 2017.
And what will make it tough?
I think it's going to make it really tough is that the world has been changing, that people no longer necessarily see the Labour Party as the opposition. It's very clear to me that the real leader of the opposition is Winston Peters. And we are going to have to get ourselves into very much standing on not only principle, we're going to have to make some pretty tough stands on issues, and we're going to have to excite and get out our base. But also...
What issues? Sorry, tough stands on issues, because, boy, it would be lovely to talk about those.
Well,
so what issues are you going to make tough stands on?
Well, I think this. If one of the biggest disappointments that I hear from when I'm going around the country is that we have not been able to secure reform in the RMA, for instance, Resource Management Act, to the extent that people who have voted for us in 3 elections have expected. And we've gone into every election promising, and we have not yet been able to deliver it. Now, I understand that's a problem with MMP. That's just what you have to deal with. But I'd also say is that we have to be able to reach across the aisle to people like New Zealand First and to work with them.
Okay. You're running for Leader of the National Party and therefore Prime Minister. Are you saying the biggest issue facing this country is that the RMA needs reform?
No, it's not the biggest issue, but it is a big issue, particularly in provincial and rural New Zealand. But I'd also say, and certainly to business, but one of the biggest issues that we have is to make sure that we have an economy that is continuing to grow. That means jobs for people, and it means jobs in provincial areas, and particularly in places like Northland. But it also is really important that we shore up law and order. We need more police. I've made this patently clear since my first meetings with the Prime Minister in June, and that is what we have to deliver on. But we also
So hold on a sec. Are you saying, as Police Minister,
yes,
you have been an advocate for more police and the Prime Minister has said no?
Prime Minister's not said no. The Prime Minister and I have been working on a plan on this. We have a plan, but I'm saying that that is actually an area that we need to do more on, and we need to do more on, particularly around methamphetamine and family violence.
Okay, if you're stuck on the Southern Motorway, and forgive me for talking
and transport.
Yeah, absolutely. But sorry, and for the rest of New Zealand, if you're listening in Wellington or the South Island, forgive me for this question, but you are an Auckland MP. If you were stuck on the Northern Motorway or the Southern Motorway at the moment, and you are earning a job which doesn't give you enough to buy a home, and you are struggling, and your warrant of fitness is due, and the petrol is expensive, you do not give a damn about the RMA, and you probably don't give a damn about police numbers either. How do you talk to the people who float around between National, New Zealand First and Labour? How do you appeal to them in a meaningful way?
John, I'm the MP for Papakura. Papakura has all of those issues, but it also has transport issues as well. So when you're saying you're stuck on the Southern Motorway, you're stuck in gridlock most of the time. So we need to do a lot more on transport and infrastructure, and we need to think outside the squares into how we actually deliver that. So when I'm looking at these issues, I know that they're really tough issues. They're big money issues, but they're also some tough decisions. And there's one thing that I can say, and obviously this is about saying who's going to do the best job as leader of the National Party. Going into that election, we're going to have a hell of a lot of tough issues and tough decisions. And I am someone who knows how to make decisions. Not everyone's going to agree with my decisions.
You polarise. You polarise people, but that what we're seeing increasingly is that's not a bad thing necessarily. I want to talk about Papakura. Your majority there in 2011 was 10,000, in 2014 it was 5,000.
Yes.
And that was because people had suddenly some disquiet about your character. Oravida, what did Justice Chisholm say about you in the Chisholm inquiry? Ms. Collins and Mr. Slater confirmed that they phoned each other often.
Well, actually, it's not illegal to have friends. And
so is Cameron, no, but it's about judgment, isn't it? Is Cameron Slater still your friend?
Actually, John, I don't ask you who your friends are. And actually, what I'd say to you is that I don't have.
Feel free to do so when I'm running for the position of Prime Minister. When I'm running for the position of Prime Minister, I would expect that sort of question. Okay. Are you still speaking to Cameron Slater often?
No, I do not speak to Cameron Slater often, and I am someone who answers calls, but I do not speak to Cameron Slater often. What I can say to you is this. I actually was exonerated by the Chisholm inquiry, absolutely exonerated. And the Prime Minister said to me that when he'd seen this report, he said it's the best report he'd ever seen in terms of very clear statements. There was no ifs, buts, maybes. It was absolutely exonerated. And what I think, too, is, my seat in Papakura, we had boundary changes before the last election. It is a very demanding and tough seat. But I can say this to people, is that people came out to vote for me, and they came out to vote despite what had been a huge campaign against actually me there. But you know what? They know this about me because I stand up for what I think, and they know this about me. I'm utterly authentic. I'm never going to pussyfoot around the place looking for a nice, comfortable place to have a position. I'm going to say exactly what I think, and I'm going to call it as I see it. And actually, I think that's what people want. And going into that 2017 election, John, we're going to need that. And we're going to have very clear policies, and people are going to have to know where we stand.
Okay,
and that's
two
what
questions.
I can deliver.
Thank you. Two questions before you go, and I appreciate that wrap. You talked about Winston Peters as being Leader of the Opposition. Could you work with him, if you needed to work with him, to get National back into government?
I could.
Okay, great. And would you offer him a senior position in Cabinet?
We'll see how it goes, but I would have to do whatever I'd have to do, and that's one of the things. I think it's
potentially
really,
Deputy Prime Minister. Would you go that high?
Well, let's just see how we go.
Okay, Bill English is on the phone.
My view is very much that we have to do the deals that we have to do, because I know that a National-led government is going to be better than a Labor-led government.
Okay. And there speaks an on-the-record pragmatist. And the other question is, and Bill English is waiting to go next, and he's listening on the phone, would you like him to stay on as Minister of Finance if you become leader?
Well, obviously, I think Bill English has been an outstanding Minister of Finance and also a Deputy Prime Minister. I actually think he has put his heart and soul in it. And I'm not sure how he's feeling about me on this one, but I think he's been an outstanding person in those roles. And I couldn't rate him any more highly than that. He's been outstanding. But that's ultimately up to him, and it's ultimately up to our caucus. We have a free vote in our caucus, and we have to be able to have a free vote because we're a party that actually believes in freedom.
Judith Collins, Corrections Minister and would-be Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for your time. Let's turn to Bill English now, who was listening to that. Bill English is 54, bang in the middle on the age front. He's been an MP for much longer than Collins or Coleman, having first entered Parliament in 1990, 26 years ago. What was the electorate of Wallace, Southland Farming Stock, boarding school in Wellington, Silverstream College, head boy. He studied business at Otago, got honours in English at Vic. He did some farming, worked for Treasury as a policy analyst, entered Parliament where he became Leader of the Opposition, fought the 2002 election spectacularly unsuccessfully, taking on Helen Clark after her first term as PM, but stayed on to become Cabinet Minister, Deputy PM under John Key, and of course Minister of Finance, having delivered 8 budgets in that role. Are you there, Minister?
I am, John.
Nice to talk to you. You were listening to Bill English was listening to Judith Collins, and she said she doesn't know what you think of her. What do you think of her?
Oh, well, look, she's a competent minister, has strong views, particularly on the issues she deals with in law and order, has been through a few rough patches in politics, and that always makes us a better politician.
Okay, yes, and that's certainly what you're saying about 2002. What do you offer that she doesn't? Given that, if we look at what's happening in global politics, there is a swing against the establishment, and you are as much now an establishment figure in New Zealand politics as anyone. 26 years in the place, 8, 9 budgets, Deputy PM. What do you offer that she doesn't?
Well, look, the caucus will just make the decision about what I offer that Judith Collins doesn't. But my focus is on taking the opportunities that New Zealand has earned from a pretty successful 7 or 8 years.
Have we not taken them well enough so far? I mean, given that you have been Minister of Finance since 2008, how can we take them in new ways, and why haven't we done so already?
Because we've got ourselves into a positive situation where we've just got a lot more choices, partly because of the government's books are now in surplus, that gives you more choices, and partly because we've just got this economy that keeps growing in a way that I think has exceeded general expectations. And there's significant areas where we can make progress because we've got a positive outlook. We need to we've got to reinforce the investment that goes with the growing economy and growing population, and that's quite a shift in thinking in New Zealand, which I think John Key has fostered with some real confidence. We need to focus more strongly on getting the benefits of growth spread more broadly around our community, because we've got the capacity to do that now, and we need to deal more effectively.
Can I come in there? Sorry to interrupt, but the benefits of growth spread more around the community. I was watching you as you were having your stand-up on the tiles in Parliament, roughly lunchtime, and you said something very similar, and I thought to myself, gosh, are you saying you don't really like the tax cuts? Were you, in fact, being a good team man, implementing the Prime Minister's tax cuts? Would you rather spend the money in other ways?
Well, the government will make whoever's the leader of it will make those decisions over the next wee while. What's pretty important is we've got the capacity to do that because of the success of the last 6 or 7 years, and there is a genuine public.
Can I push you on that? Can I push you on that personally? Because you are running for head of the party and you are running for Prime Minister, and I understand. And when I talk to people in the National Party, they say Bill English's loyalty is beyond any reproach. You have understood that you are number 2 in the government and that the Prime Minister holds sway, but now that is no longer the case. Are you less keen on tax cuts than he was?
Well, I think that's a bit hypothetical. We've done some tax cut packages. We did a hardship package in the last year or so, which focused on the very lowest income families in persistent hardship, increased in benefit levels first time in 43 years. So, look, the Prime Minister and I think fairly similarly actually on a lot of this stuff, but the circumstances ahead of us provide us with better opportunities than we've had in the past, and there will be no doubt part of the political debate of election year is going to be the extent to which the benefits of growth are shared equitably and fairly.
Bill, that phrase "fairly similarly" is a beautiful phrase, because fairly similarly is not. I mean, what does that mean? You are running to replace John Key as Prime Minister and as leader of the National Party. What are the differences? When you say fairly similarly, what is the dissimilar stuff? What would you do if you were leader that you have not previously been able to do under John Key?
Well, look, it's different people bring different things to it. So, for instance, I'm a bit more focused on policy because I've spent a lot of time on public policy in the machinery of government. So that means that if I'm a Prime Minister, I can focus on some of the intricacies of complicated issues. Like, here's an example: our housing market works in a way, because of our long-standing planning laws, in a way that means that costs for family, particularly low and middle income families, for housing are higher than they need to be. To achieve change in that is quite complex, but as a Prime Minister I welcome the challenge because it has such a big impact on such a lot of people, and we could avoid the instability of further exaggerated housing cycles. Now, because I've spent 4 or 5 years on the innards of that machine, then as a Prime Minister I can apply myself to it and we can get some results. It's a bit different. That's just a bit different than how another leader would do it.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly different from how Judith Collins would do it. And speaking to you, there is a profound difference. I mean, she is marketing herself as tough and singular. And I had a list of people here: Warren Kidd, Barry Matthews, Leanne Dalzell, John Judge, Howard Broad. They've all ended up on the wrong side of Judith Collins, and that's been problematic for them. Are you tough enough in the kinds of ways that people like leaders of the National Party? And let's look back. Bolger was quite low-key, but pretty tough. He got rid of Richardson. Muldoon, we know, was tough. Key, affable, Mr. Conviviality, but actually behind the scenes tough. Are you that kind of tough?
Well, I think I can make the decisions that need to be made for stable and effective government, and that has to be the driving force. It's not so much about proving a point of toughness, but what needs to happen so that you can keep delivering the progress that the New Zealand public expect.
Do you want it?
Yes.
Bill English, Finance Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's turn to Jonathan Coleman now. He's the Minister of Health, the MP for Northcote, 50 years old. He's the youngest of the 3. Head boy at Auckland Grammar. He studied medicine, worked as a doctor, gained a postgraduate diploma in obstetrics, then an MBA from the London Business School, having entered Parliament in 2005. He is the shortest serving MP of the 3. Are you there, Minister?
Good evening, John. I am indeed.
Yeah, good. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you.
Yeah. So, very distinct pitch from Judith Collins, and business as usual, but possibly with a longer leash from Bill English, right? I tried to pin Bill English down on tax cuts, and I think he's saying, well, this is something caucus has to decide and all that kind of stuff. Would you go ahead with the tax cuts? Because Bill English talks about how we distribute the dividends of growth.
Well, I tell you, I'm in my electorate office each week, and I'm widely involved in my electorate. I'm down at my local primary school This is not an issue that people raise with me, and my strong feeling is we have to make sure that the health and education systems and infrastructure are properly funded first, but especially those social services.
So wait a sec. So forgive me, because boy, this is an important time to get clarity and to get people putting a stake in the ground. You're saying no.
I'm saying you'd really want to understand what you need to put into health and education to deliver on what New Zealanders absolutely expect us to provide. And look, I think we've been doing a great job, if I might say so myself, in those portfolios. But there's always pressure in those areas. Things like education, access to special education, mental health. I want to provide more community mental health services. And those are the sort of things that people come into my electorate office in Northcote and raise with me. Those are the things that are important to them. They haven't raised tax cuts with me. Sure, if we had money left over, it'd be good to do that. But I am very much in touch, because I'm out in the community all the time, with what's important to those people in the community, not only those who have voted for us for the last 8 years, but I believe the vast band of Middle New Zealand. So that's my view on it.
Okay, absolutely. You're representing yourself as a change candidate, right?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, but can I respectfully suggest to you that you are in fact a sheep in wolf's clothing? I mean, I just wonder.
What the heck does that
mean, you opposed the Marriage Amendment Bill, gay marriage. You have a holiday house in Omaha, which is the same incredibly expensive beach as John Key. You have had, your CV. You just want to stand and clap when you read it. But I just wonder what experience you have of the kind of issues that are confronting New Zealand and which seem to have presented an Achilles heel to this government.
Look, John, I tell you, in my medical career, I've worked with a wide range of people. I've, worked out in Otara doing general practice. I've worked overseas extensively, providing healthcare services to low-income people. I'm down at my local primary school all the time. I'm educating my children in the state system. I mean, the fact that I've got a house in Omaha, that's irrelevant. It's, to draw that, inference.
Look, cheap shot.
I focus on what's important to my constituents, and that's what they're telling me.
Okay, and your constituents are Northcote is an affluent electorate, isn't it? And once again,
it's quite a mixed election, actually. It was held by Labor for a long time, and I won it off Labor. There's a real mixture. There's over 300 Housing New Zealand properties within 15 minutes walk of where I live.
So the people in the Housing New Zealand properties, who I think we would all agree have just about lost any hope of ever owning their own home now, haven't they, in this city anyway?
I don't know about that, but look...
Really, what do you say to them about realising what used to be a fairly ordinary kind of New Zealand dream?
Well, you know what? It all comes back in the end to education and skills, and that's why this government's put a big emphasis on that, and aspiration and the vision that John Key has laid out. And I think one thing that's very important in this selection race we're having is we've got to build on the excellent platform that we've been working off for the last 8 years, but go on further, because we want to see all those young kids growing up in the Housing New Zealand area of Northcote, my electorate, succeeding and going on to have the sort of success that they can enjoy with an education system that's consistently and highly delivering for them. We've got a great education system, we've got a great health system, but we've got to make sure we're focusing on what's really important to the voters out there. And that's going to require new ideas, it's going to require new policies, and very importantly, John, in terms of the political side, a continual sense of regeneration.
Okay, what's your best new idea? What is your best new idea?
Well, this is the point I'm making. It's all about talking with the caucus, drawing on their views, and actually coming up with an attractive policy platform. But I'll give you an example. If you look at infrastructure, we've done a great job in infrastructure, roading, water, all the rest of it. But actually, we need far more in the years ahead to build New Zealand businesses, make this an easy place to run businesses, and make the system more productive. Now, perhaps we can do, John, perhaps we can do something more inventive in terms of things like financing instruments. I mean, in Auckland, we need a cross-harbour tunnel. Can we wait 30 years for that like NZTA want us to? I don't think so. Why don't we look at what other financing instruments there might be to get that type of infrastructure? That's only one example. Built and up so we can get the country running at a level that actually makes it more productive and accommodates the growing population we've got.
Jonathan Coleman, Health Minister, and the third of the people who are running to be Leader of the National Party and Prime Minister. We've spoken to them all now, Judith Collins, Bill English and Jonathan Coleman. Thank you to them all. And may the best candidate win. It is 5:29. Let's go to Matthew Hooton, who is a former National Party Press Secretary, a political commentator, often heard on national radio, and has a really good insight into this caucus and how I think the numbers are falling. Matthew, are you there?
Yes, good evening.
Nice to talk to you. Who has it, do you think? Now, I'm already looking at poll after poll that says English is way out in front, but actually those polls don't matter. It's what caucus is doing. How are the numbers falling, do you think?
The polls don't matter. There's only 59 people who get a vote here, and some of those people are not very famous at this point, and this is their one chance to have a say over the direction of the government. As it stands, Bill English, as of right now, Bill English obviously has it, but that could change. Bill English is being supported, but roughly speaking, the higher up you are in the national hierarchy, the more likely you are to support Bill English. The kitchen cabinet of John Key, Bill English, Jerry Brownlee, and Stephen Joyce, the four white men who have run this government for 8 years, are all in behind English. But so are many others in the cabinet, people like Hekia Parata, Ann Tolley, obviously Nick Smith, Murray McCully, because these are people who have most to gain from the status quo. And Bill English, because he's been deputy, is perceived as the status quo candidate. Now, the question that caucus members are still asking themselves, they've gone through a process of shock, right? Probably denial and shock. And then they quickly thought, I'll support Bill English because that's what John Key wants. But what's happened is they've realised that, no, this is their choice. And this is, for some of them, one of the few things they'll ever do in politics. If you're a junior National List MP, this is the one big decision you're going to make in your political career. And what they're thinking is, to what extent do we want change? To what extent do we want change in the style of the government and in some of its personnel? Now, that doesn't mean they're necessarily against Bill English, but if Bill English is to prevail and he remains the favourite, he is going to have to convince that backbench tail that they have a possibility of promotion and that he is going to run a government that is not John Key's government without John Key, because that cannot succeed. John Key's government was a one-off, just like Helen Clark, just like Jim Bolger, just like David Longy's. This new government has to reflect the personality and the style of the new generation of people. So,
and forgive me for putting a cynical interpretation on what you're saying. If you're sitting there and you're thinking, what's best for me? So you are the aforementioned junior list MP and you're thinking, okay, you know, what is the combination that is going to be most likely to promote me or notice me or give me a shot? Who are you looking at? Are you looking at Collins? Are you looking at Coleman? Are you looking at English, hoping that he can do what you're suggesting he might not be able to do? Who's the front runner there?
Between those two, I would think that Jonathan Coleman is seen as the safer pair of hands. But that may be to his disadvantage, because if the caucus does feel that Bill English will not deliver some type of change, some type of new personnel. If for example, the caucus feels that Prime Minister English will have, you know, Jerry Brownlee running Christchurch, Stephen Joyce as Minister of Finance, Murray McCully as Foreign Minister, then they're going to look at one of the change candidates, and that might be Coleman. But what Collins offers is a bit of a risk. Her government would certainly be different from John Key's. I mean, she's never been entirely comfortable there. And as you go down towards the second half of the National Caucus, you see more of her supporters, people who think, well, that might be the way to go.
Right. I know we are reading the tea leaves now, but who do you think will be Prime Minister this time next week?
I think at this stage, Bill English will win narrowly, but he will have won by making commitments to change the top end of the Cabinet more substantially than what we think at this point. But look, I mean, we are reading the tea leaves. These people haven't, these 59 MPs, half of them haven't made up their minds themselves. So there's nothing to know here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I've had clients ringing me all day, who's going to have the numbers. The fact is, the caucus itself has not yet decided. They probably won't decide till Monday. And don't rule out another entrant or two if the caucus starts to lose confidence in one or two or three of the names that have been put forward now.
Matthew Hooton, political commentator, thank you very much indeed for your time. It's 26 minutes, 25 and a half, in fact, to 6. Here's Paul with the headlines.
Thank you, John. In our headlines, National Party MPs will choose between 3 senior cabinet ministers for their new leader, along with anyone else who might throw their hat in the ring before next Monday's vote. Bill English, Jonathan Coleman and Judith Collins have today all declared their intention to stand. Mr English already has the public backing of 8 other ministers, including the outgoing Prime Minister John Key. Amy Adams is ruling herself out of the contest for leader, but is leaving the door open for the position of deputy. Meanwhile, Parliament has gone into urgent debate on Mr Key's resignation. The debate was requested by the New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters. The Ministry of Social Development has been convicted of breaching workplace safety legislation, but no further penalty has been imposed on it. The charge, brought by WorkSafe, followed the fatal shooting of 2 work and income staff members at the Ministry's Ashburton office in 2014. The Chief District Court Judge, Jan-Marie Doog, said she could not impose a fine because the defendant was a Crown organisation, but had it been possible, she would have fined it $16,000. The Transport Agency says crews working on State Highway 1 south of Kaikoura have cleared more than half of the 25 slips created by last month's earthquakes. It says it has cleared 13 and is making good progress on the 14th and 15th, the 2 biggest. A chemical explosion in a laboratory forced the evacuation of Westlake Boys High School in Auckland this afternoon. The fire service shift manager, Jaron Phillips, says a jar of bromine exploded. Mr Phillips says the chemicals have been isolated inside a hazardous materials drum, and a hazardous materials unit is decontaminating the area and airing the building. He says he understands no one was injured. And in sport, Australia have got off to a roaring start in their second one-day cricket international against the Black Caps in Canberra. A short time ago, they were 59 for none after 11 overs. New Zealand earlier won the toss and elected to bowl first. Those are our headlines. Our next news and sport update will be at 6.
You are with Checkpoint on RNZ, a frantic first half hour. We'd love your feedback on how you feel this is falling, who you support or don't support, and what you would like to see from them. Text us 2101, email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We're on Twitter at checkpointrnz and Facebook. In fact, our Facebook site is doing a roaring trade. Thank you to all who are going there. Coming up on the program, a 91-year-old woman is attacked in her home. $50 and a comb seems to have been taken. Police investigating a mysterious burglary in South Westland, which has left 13,000 juvenile salmon dead. And the Wellington Phoenix Air replacement for their outgoing coach will be made before Christmas. Let's go to business headlines now, though, with Jonathan Mitchell, who joins us from Wellington. Hi, Jonathan. The end of an era for the Barker family and also straight shipping. Tell me about the Barker family.
That's right. Well, that includes Bluebridge, the freight companies, Freight Lines and Streamline. They're being sold to Australian investors, and it's certainly, as you mentioned, the end of the line for the family. It all started with the founder, Jim Barker. He died in August. He was involved in the sale process, so it was got his approval for that. The family have acknowledged that this is the end of the line for them, really, but they are confident the businesses will continue to grow. Those Australian investors under Champ Private Equity are looking to expand further, looking to expand those businesses in the current freight and passenger transport markets. A settlement is expected early next year. No price has been disclosed at the moment, but for now it's business as usual.
Okay, what else is going on? Some words of caution about economic growth and the pace thereof?
Well, we are growing at about 3.5% at the moment, John. That's probably the envy of many countries around the world, that growth rate. We've had a monthly look at truck movements from the ANZ, their truckometer index. It was up on the month before. But the indicator that gives us a look ahead 6 months down the track and beyond, that's sort of flattened out a bit, which indicates that the economic growth could ease over the coming months. ANZ is suggesting somewhere around 3%, which is still pretty good. There are those main hurdles to that, which have come up again in this survey and have come up in others more recently. The lack of finding skilled staff is becoming quite a bugbear for many businesses, and something that's popped up in this, finding available credit from the banks, getting available credit. So that's something that businesses have mentioned. We will get a good update on the economic numbers on Thursday with Treasury's half-year fiscal economic update.
This stuff becomes important in the context of the leadership, but doesn't it? Because this is about growth and how much money there is to spend and all that kind of stuff. What happened on the markets?
Well, there was pretty broad gains across the world today, certainly in reflection of that Italian vote, the referendum on the weekend. We've gained again today. The top 50 index up 56 points to end at 6910, and the dollar hovering around 71.5 US cents and just under 96 Australian.
Jonathan Mitchell, live from Wellington, thank you. The daughter of a 91-year-old woman who was attacked in her Auckland home says they are cowards and lowlifes. Eileen Harwood suffered a head injury yesterday after two men who pretended to be lost pushed her to the ground and made off with her purse, which had $50 and a comb inside. Ms Harwood was resting at home today, but our reporter Sally Murphy spoke with her daughter Sue Tutt, who witnessed the attack.
Sue Tutt and her mum live right next door to each other in Mount Wellington. A visibly shaken Sue says they'd just got home from doing some shopping when two men approached them at their front door.
And they said that they were lost and could I help them? And I said, why? And they said, we need some information. And all the time this guy, and he was walking up the steps and he was getting closer and closer to me, and I thought, this isn't good. And then the next minute he sort of just pushed right past me. And Mum came over and she said, what the hell are you doing? And the next minute he just went like that and pushed her, and she fell on her back. And she was like unconscious. And they just grabbed hold of her shopping bag and took off.
The attackers got away with the elderly woman's mirror and comb and about $50. Sue Tutt had a sleepless night worrying about her mum, who spent last night in hospital but is back home resting now. Ms Tutt says her mother is resilient and feisty and will get on with things.
Whether they were going to target her or not, I don't know, but maybe they saw that she was like an old lady, and I don't know, but I don't think they kind of expected me to be there as well. They're just lowlifes, aren't they? I reckon it's just cowardly. I just can't believe that people do stuff like that anymore. Why would you go and hurt an old lady? I kept thinking last night, like, maybe if I hadn't been there, what would they have done to her, you know?
Detective Senior Sergeant Glenn Baldwin says the police are still searching for the two men. He says elderly people have the right to feel safe at home.
Detectives have been out since this morning in the Mountain Road area, canvassing door to door and seeking to retrieve CCTV. The CCTV will be reviewed as part of the investigation.
The offenders are described as fair-skinned Māori or Pacific Islanders. One was about 25 and the other was about 15, wearing a tan-coloured hoodie. They got away in a metallic blue sedan. Detective Senior Sergeant Glenn Baldwin says anyone with information about the men or the attack should contact the police. In Auckland for Checkpoint, call Sally Murphy tēnei.
Police are investigating a mysterious burglary in South Westland which left 13,000 juvenile salmon dead. The incident happened on Saturday night when the offenders broke into the property, shutting off a water supply and causing the fish to suffocate. Ben Monk is the co-owner of the Pāringa Salmon Farm and Cafe.
They've come in the middle of the night, obviously, and there's two hatchery tanks, and they've actually closed the water gates, the water gate control valves into each tank, so they've actually deliberately gone in there and closed them off.
So this isn't a theft or a burglary in which they turned off the mains to nullify a security camera or something. This is a wanton act of vandalism which has led to, 13,000 small salmon dying?
Yeah, 13,000 juvenile salmon, which is the future stock for the salmon farm itself, and they've they have gone out to the ponds as well and tried to catch a fish out there or something and thrown the nets into the ponds and things like that, and obviously been riding around on the quad bike we have underneath. So they've done a few other little random things, but yeah, what they've done with the hatchery has been very, very malicious.
So you think it is malicious rather than just stupid and reckless? You think they knew what they were doing?
It's hard to know because they would have had to have a really good look at it or have known what they were doing to actually, it's not like they've just flicked the pump off. They've actually gone to all the trouble of shutting the gates. So, yeah, it's really hard to know why someone would do that or if it's just someone being stupid or if it's actually an attack on us. I'm not sure.
Wow. And so is that your entire salmon stock?
No, we've got different years, or we've got different age groups, but it is the entire stock for the of the breeding stock for next year.
Okay, so that really is, this is a crippling attack, isn't it?
Oh, there's 6 months of hard labour gone into these little fish. They're at their most vulnerable age. They're just coming out of that, so you're up here in the middle of the night checking them, and if there's power cuts, we've got to come and turn the generator on, all that kind of stuff. So there's 6 months of a lot of hard work gone into it from myself and all of our staff as well. So
how long can they survive in these circumstances? In other words, how long do you think there was between somebody there last seeing them alive and somebody discovering them dead?
Look, if those gates are shut, you've probably got 30 minutes, I would say, 30 minutes to maybe 45 minutes, and you're going to lose the whole lot. So. Yeah, it's not a huge time frame.
And they're effectively suffocated by air.
They just run out of oxygen. Yeah, that's all that happens.
Where are the police at? Have you said, look, actually, there's a couple of people we notice loitering around, or?
No, look, the police, our local police are really, really good, and he came up straight away, but we couldn't find anything untoward, and I honestly have no idea who would actually intentionally come in and do that. We've got no suspects. We just can't think of anyone. Insurance,
are you covered?
No, they don't cover that age fish. Are not, it's really hard to cover them. So you don't normally have you're not expecting something like that to happen. So
no, you're not.
That's the only part of our whole business that's not covered.
Oh, Ben, I'm so sorry. What's the cost to you of this?
Well, we've worked out it's really hard to work out, but I'd say between $15,000 and $20,000 of stock there, plus all the labour and everything that's gone into it as well on top of that. So it's a hairy one to work out, but it's upwards of $20,000 anyway.
And a whole lot of hassle. I mean, now you have to replace the stock, can you?
Yeah, we've been on to New Zealand Salmon Smolt in Christchurch, and we're going to get some off those guys, but there's 3 or 4 trips to Christchurch to count them back, and that's 6 hours away. It's a real kick in the arse for us, and we like to think we're pretty good people, and we don't sort of do anyone any harm, and for someone to come in and do that, it's pretty devastating. It's a pretty tight-knit community down here, and so everyone's a little bit shaken too. Well, if that's people can do something like that, what's next?
You're a bloody long way from anywhere there in Haast, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, we're between Haast and Fox Glacier, so we're 40 minutes in either direction from any built-up area at all, really. Plus, 3 or 4 hours from the nearest town.
Ben Monk from Partinga Salmon in Westland. Obviously, anyone who knows anything about that is urged to contact the police. An Auckland-based iwi has announced plans to turn part of a reserve into 300 houses after sealing a deal to buy the land from the government. Ngāti Pawa has bought 12 hectares of Point England Reserve, that's in East Auckland, and will start building the homes at the end of next year. Sharon Brett-Kelly's just been at the announcement and joins us in the studio. Nice to have you back,
Hello,
Sharon.
John.
What's it all about?
Well, so Ngāti Pawa has bought this land at market value. They say the land is worth tens of millions of dollars. This is prime land. It's on the Tamaki estuary in East Auckland, neighbouring the big Tamaki development where they're turning state housing into more state housing, basically, thousands of state housing. It's an important deal, obviously, for the iwi. It takes about a quarter of that reserve, and currently it's cows grazing on it. People use it for a sports field, that kind of thing. So what they're saying is this is better use of the land in Auckland at the time when housing is so desperately needed.
Right, so better land, a desperate need for housing. How much of it will be social or affordable housing? Has that been laid out yet?
Yeah, now they're not being absolutely down to the number, but they're saying about 20% will be social housing, 20% will be affordable housing.
So 40% in total?
40% in total,
yep.
60% will be private housing. This is all privately funded, this development. It's being done by Ngāti Pawa. The government isn't pitching in any money, but obviously it will be involved at the social housing end once it's done.
Okay, when will all this start?
It's starting at the end of next year. The government actually needs to. Nick Smith is going to introduce a bill into Parliament tomorrow that would turn the reserve into different use for housing. So that's happening tomorrow. By the time that goes through, they reckon the development will start at the end of next year, take 3 to 5 years.
OK, and there is a sticking point. Nick Smith's introducing the bill. What does Phil Goff, the Mayor, think of it?
Yeah, well, Phil Goff is saying, great, more housing for Auckland, but they want 100% of the proceeds from the sale to go back into public land, because they're saying this area is going to develop very quickly. The population is going to grow very quickly over the next few years, and having public land is crucial. And, you know, they've lost some public land that was used for sports fields, that kind of thing. Nick Smith is saying we'll put some of the proceeds into that.
OK, so Phil Goff's issue is not with Ngāti Paoa.
No.
It's with the government and what it's going to do with the money it's getting for the land.
Exactly.
And in fact, as more and more space like this is lost to housing development, public land becomes even more of a premium, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what they're saying. It is a premium. And I think they're saying that the population there is going to grow by 20,000 in the next few years. So that's a big chunk of people out there. But Nick Smith says no, they're not going to put all of it into public land, but they are going to put it into the Tamaki community.
Sharon Brett-Kelly, thank you very much indeed. We look forward to hearing what happens there. It is coming up to 10 minutes to 6. The Wellington Phoenix says a replacement for outgoing coach Ernie Merrick will be made before Christmas. This is football, of course. For those of you who don't follow sport, Merrick, who's coached the side in the Australian Football League for the past 3.5 years, announced his shock departure with the club languishing at the bottom of the competition. Possibly not too much of a shock to some who were saying this simply isn't good enough. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
What a strike, Enrique! This is a match he will never forget. 2 goals of the highest quality.
That 2-0 loss to Adelaide on Sunday was the final straw for Ernie Merrick. At a team dinner later that night, Merrick stood up and announced he was resigning, which captain Andrew Durante says completely took the side off guard.
Players' reaction was silence. No one said anything. Everyone was trying to take it in. And then Ernie and the staff left the room, and actually Mossy stood up and said, "This is on us," and it is. The players have to own this. At the end of the day, the coach takes the full brunt of poor performances. We know that. That's the nature of the beast, of the sport. But, we have to accept that we are responsible for this.
The Phoenix have won just 2 of their 8 games this season, but Durante says suggestions that the players had lost faith in Merrick are off the mark.
You read social media and people come up with their own opinions that he lost the change room and lost the playing group, and never. There was never any of that. And we're obviously shocked and disappointed. We still believe that he could have got us out of this.
The Phoenix club chairman Rob Morrison says Merrick wanted to resign after the side's 6-1 hiding at the hands of Melbourne Victory in October, but he persuaded him to stay on.
Sometimes you can get most of your ducks aligned, but there's a sort of X factor that sits there that you can't quite figure out. And in this particular case, he said, really honestly, I don't think I can find that X factor which is going to get these players winning.
Ernie Merrick is adamant that he wasn't under pressure to call it quits.
I made the call. I didn't want anyone to get blamed for it other than myself. And I'm sort of in the back of my mind, I'm going, no, you should just hang on a little bit longer because it will work. But no, I made the call and I'll stick by it.
The Phoenix management have drawn up a short list of possible candidates to replace Merrick and intend announcing a replacement before Christmas. For Checkpoint, Stephen Hewson.
Criminal investigators have begun removing buckets of evidence from the charred remains of a building in Oakland, California after fire swept through during a weekend dance party. The death toll from the blaze has now risen to 36 people. It's the greatest loss of life from a fire in the US in over a decade. Survivors have been describing the terror inside the building, which was crammed full of thousands of items which blocked the paths to an escape. This report from CNN.
It was Friday night, and witnesses say an electronic dance party on the 2nd floor of this warehouse was just getting started when flames erupted in the back of the building. The smoke and fire quickly filled the floors, overtaking the crowd as people scrambled to escape. Bob Muley says he tried to drag out his friend who'd injured his ankle.
I just immediately took his arm and I was pulling him out. I just got to a certain point where there was all this stuff like blocking my path. The fire was just getting too hot and the smoke was just getting too bad, and I had to I had to leave him there.
The warehouse, nicknamed the Ghost Ship, was an elaborate maze of rooms. Furniture, electronics, and art filled the two-story space in what was billed as a 24-hour work studio for area artists, like Shelley Mack, who made jewelry there, and she says she once lived there.
It looked like a big, huge caravan, like a carnival, because there were all kind of crazy, there was, 5 or 6 mobile homes all done up like old school. There was a lot of antiques. There was 52 pianos and organs that played 24/7. I mean, beautiful music all night and day. I kind of like that kind of a thing.
But investigators say the building was in total disrepair. There were no sprinklers, only 2 exits. One, witnesses describe as a pile of wooden pallets made into stairs. In November, the owner received a citation for hazardous trash and debris, but there are questions about why the city never shut the building down. An investigation into the recent complaints remains open.
We're looking at everything from our body-worn camera footage, how many calls we as the Oakland Police Department have gone to, what types of calls.
Now, the city's district attorney is also taking a look, and an arson task force has been formed.
We do request patience, time. We want to do a very thorough investigation, whichever direction that takes us, whether it's criminal.
For now, focus turns to finding the victims. For Mac, it's an emotional return to her former home, now turned crime scene with a growing memorial.
That report from CNN. Home again, local surfers are so fed up with Freedom Campers. They've chained up a toilet block and asked people to leave a popular camping spot in Taranaki. Up to 20 station wagons and vans were parked at Paroa Road, a well-known South Taranaki surf break, where council bylaws permit only 3 self-contained vehicles per night. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin has more on this story.
Okato surfer Chris Wilkes says Porora Road is becoming overrun and South Taranaki's new freedom camping bylaw is not being policed.
Basically we have a car park being used as a campground, and we had about 28 vehicles here last night. So a lot of people are getting a bit annoyed, so instead of getting annoyed I just sort of go and talk to them and try and move them on, just tell them there's a campground down the road. They can go down there, $5 a night, showers and toilets available, so it's a much better option.
Mr Wilkes says most of the campers were understanding and some left, but others refused to budge. He took the registration numbers of those who stayed and returned a while later and chained up the toilet.
We've got a small toilet here. It's not actually designed for the capacity. You've got 50 plus people here staying every night and they might use the toilet twice. It's actually overflowing at the moment, so some of that wastewater is running down onto the reef.
Mr Wilkes says more needs to be done to control the situation before there is a confrontation between surfers and campers. Fellow surfer Nigel Carter says a freedom camping app has made things worse.
I had a guts fall, and it's only been since it's all been on Campermate. It's just been an onslaught every day, but some days there's 20, 30 cars camped here. They roar down here at speed, cover you with dust, none of them surf. They set up here with their tables and chairs, light fires and festoon the bushes with toilet paper and piss.
Mr Carter says freedom campers should be charged like they are in Hawaii and the money channelled back into the community. German backpackers Lisa Reinhardt and Nina Schrib found Porora Road via the Campermate app. Ms Reinhardt says they didn't know there was a limit on the number of vehicles and there was confusion about what the rules were.
No, we not, but other German people say to us that only 3 on this side, I don't know. We in camping grounds we was before, there it's not only 3. There was, I don't know, many, yeah.
Brent Manning is the Group Manager for Engineering Services at the South Taranaki District Council. Mr Manning says the number of freedom campers is unprecedented.
To be fair, I think what we're seeing is a result of perhaps, what's gone on for the Kaikoura earthquakes, probably seeing some travellers reroute their plans. We're also, we're riding on the hype of Taranaki being one of the top 2 places in the world to visit, according to Lonely Planet, so no doubt the word's getting out.
Mr Manning says the council is encouraging people to get in contact if the rules are broken because it's not going to actively police the bylaw. He draws the line at vigilante-style antics, however.
And one of our staff, I think, has been out this morning and unbolted the or release whatever was put around the toilets. So there is probably, I suspect that's someone wanting to make their views known and about they're probably unhappy about what's going on.
Mr Manning says the toilet at Parora Road is safe to use and the water running through a nearby culvert is groundwater. For Checkpoint, ko Robin Martin Tēnei.
Gosh, we've had similar stories from around the country about simply infrastructure that can't cope with the number of freedom campers, lots of them in the year that we've been on air. It's coming up to 1 minute to 6. Let's have a little bit of the sting. Written by James Milne, of course, that sing. I saw him play on Saturday night. It was a fantastic concert. Lots of feedback coming in, and some of it is heartfelt and passionate, but possibly not the kind of stuff we can share on the radio. This sort of distills what people are saying. There is only one possible person for this job. Bill English is the one. Judith Collins, no. Jonathan Coleman, definitely not. No Mana. Average health portfolio. That from Barbara. Overwhelmingly, the people contacting us are saying it has to be Bill English of those three. Thank you. We're going to look at more of this after the news at 6. Also, relief for Kaikoura dairy farmers who are now able to truck their milk out. And the Māori MP criticises her parliamentary colleagues for a heartbreaking lack of interest in addressing historical grievances.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. The Deputy Prime Minister Bill English says he will provide stable and effective government if he's chosen as leader of the National Party and becomes Prime Minister next Monday. Mr English threw his hat in the ring for the top job earlier today. He says he's focused on building on the opportunities his government has helped to create through the last 3 terms. Mr English told Checkpoint the books are in surplus and the economy keeps growing, and he'd like to see the benefits of that growth spread throughout the community.
I think I can make the decisions that need to be made for stable and effective government, and that has to be the driving force. It's not so much about proving a point of toughness, but what needs to happen so that you can keep delivering the progress that the New Zealand public expect.
Bill English. Judith Collins told the programme her biggest policy priorities are to do with policing, transport, the economy and the Resource Management Act. She says her authenticity and assertiveness make her the best candidate to lead the party.
I stand up for what I think. I'm utterly authentic. I'm never going to pussyfoot around the place looking for a nice, comfortable place to have a position. I'm going to say exactly what I think and I'm going to call it as I see it. And actually, I think that's what people want.
Judith Collins. Jonathan Coleman says he would spend more money on social services at the expense of tax cuts. He told the programme it's important that health, education and infrastructure are properly funded before tax cuts are considered.
Things like education, access to special education, mental health. I want to provide more community mental health services. And those are the sort of things that people come into my electorate office in Northcote and raise with me. Those are the things that are important to them. They haven't raised tax cuts with me.
Dr. Jonathan Coleman. The Justice Minister, Amy Adams, has ruled herself out of the contest for leader, but is leaving the door open for the position of deputy. Scientists say they now have evidence that 9 faults ruptured in the Kaikoura earthquake. Geologist Rob Langridge, who flew over the area today, has just confirmed the tally has risen from 7 faults to 9. He says the quake now stands as being of similar complexity to the 1855 Wairarapa earthquake, in which many onshore and offshore faults ruptured and which caused a tsunami. Mr. Langridge says several faults also simultaneously ruptured in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The Grey District Mayor, Tony Cockshawn, is calling on Solid Energy to take stock and stop the permanent sealing of the Pike River mine before it's too late. Some of the families and friends of the 29 men who died in the mine say they have expert advice. The mine's drift is safe to enter and shouldn't be sealed before it can be searched. Mr. Cockshawn says Solid Energy needs to reassess the situation.
We feel under the right conditions, with professional volunteers, they can do a reconnaissance in there and out, which will put the minds of the families at rest one way or another, and then Solid Energy can proceed to seal the mine.
The Mayor of the Grey District, Tony Cockshorn. Tougher restrictions on recreational and commercial fishing in the Hauraki Gulf are proposed in a new plan being unveiled in Auckland tonight. The aim is to tackle growing problems like depleted seafood stocks, sediment damage and pressure from population growth. Sharon Brett Kelly reports.
The plan has been drawn up by a group of iwi and local and central government representatives. They propose creating 13 new marine protected areas and extending 2 existing ones, while setting limits on the amount of sediment and nutrients produced by farming. Areas for expanded sustainable marine farming are also suggested. Eventually, they would like to see certain commercial fishing methods banned and a review of the way fish stocks are managed. Central and local government agencies will now consider the proposals. I Tamaki Makoto ko Sharon Brett Kelly aho.
The police in the Kenyan capital Nairobi have fired tear gas to disperse hundreds of striking doctors. Doctors, nurses and other medical staff working in public hospitals throughout the country went on strike yesterday. The BBC's Ferdinand Omondi reports.
The doctors' union said public hospitals would not be offering even emergency services. This puts thousands of lives at risk because many Kenyans cannot afford private medical care. Besides their salary concerns, the doctors' union wants more medics hired to reduce the doctor-patient ratio. Yesterday, state officials held emergency meetings and Health Minister Cleopa Mailu begged the doctors to hold a strike and negotiate. But the union declined, accusing the state of dragging its feet.
Ferdinand Omondi in Kenya. Westlake Boys High School in Auckland was evacuated this afternoon after a chemical explosion in one of its laboratories. Firefighters were called to the school at 2:15 when a jar of bromine exploded. A fire service shift manager, Jaron Phillips, says the chemicals have been isolated inside a hazardous materials drum and a hazardous materials unit is decontaminating the area. He says he understands no one was hurt. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the Icelandic odyssey of Martina Lamberty and Nick Channon, who drove around the island in an ex-army ambulance. I didn't know Iceland had an army. Maybe they don't anymore. The BBC series Jobs for the Girls meets some of the women taking on formerly male-only roles in rural India, while this week's pundit is our mathematician Dylan Mayhew, who wants to discuss infinity, which is a mighty big topic, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Mid-service short forecast now for the country. It takes us through to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday. Northland to Waitomo and Taupo, including Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty. Long, fine spells, isolated showers, mainly during the afternoon and evenings. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly fine. High cloud increases tomorrow. Taranaki to Wellington, that includes Taihape and the Wairarapa. Fine spells for the rest of today. Isolated showers about the ranges, though, and cloud will increase tomorrow. Rain developing in the evening tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, fine today. High clouds, scattered rain tomorrow, heavy in the west later. Canterbury, high cloud, a few spots of rain. Rain becomes widespread and heavy about the high country tomorrow. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain or drizzle today, rain becoming heavy tomorrow. Otago and Southland, mostly cloudy with a few showers, turning to widespread rain for a time tomorrow. At the Chatham Islands, it'll be fine for the rest of today. Cloudy periods there tomorrow. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 6 o'clock.
Thanks, Paul. What a difference a day makes, eh? Who would have picked this? Yesterday morning, the National Party leadership has turned into a 3-horse race following John Key's sudden resignation. Finance Minister Bill English, Health Minister Jonathan Coleman and Police and Corrections Minister Judith Collins have all thrown their hats into the ring for this top job. I spoke to them all earlier. Those interviews are now online, but here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
National Party MPs met for 2 hours this morning as they decided on the process for selecting a new leader. The Northcote MP and former GP Jonathan Coleman was the first contender to publicly declare his hand when the caucus broke up. Dr Coleman says he's putting his name forward because it's time for some regeneration in the leadership.
I feel it needs generational change. It's going to need new thinking in policy areas. It's going to need some new personnel, so combining the best of the current lineup with those who are coming through the caucus. We've got an extremely talented caucus.
Dr Coleman says he's not worried about possible divisions within the party now that the leadership is being contested.
Look, it's around how people conduct themselves, things staying in the caucus room, and in the end, look, once we've made this decision, we've all got to get behind the winner, and obviously I hope to be that winner.
Bill English, the contender with John Key's backing, was next to confirm his interest in the top job.
I've been intimately involved in the policies of the John Key-led government. I can see fantastic opportunities for stronger economic performance, for spreading the benefits of growth for more New Zealanders, and for getting stuck into some of our most intractable social problems, an area where we're just getting started really. So I'm a candidate for the leadership.
Bill English steered the National Party to an historic 2002 election loss when it won just 21% of the party vote. He says the circumstances are different now.
The National Party was different, the political environment was quite different. I've had, worked closely with the Prime Minister, learned an awful lot in those 15 years. And I think it's partly because of that experience, can see the opportunities ahead.
On her way into question time this afternoon, Judith Collins also threw her hat in.
I know it's going to take not only a huge amount of work, but it's going to need to take someone who can make decisions, who can think on their feet, who can make hard calls, and who can connect to New Zealanders, whether they're women, men, or of any ethnicity. And I believe I can do that.
Ms Collins says she's firmly put past controversies around Orovida and the Serious Fraud Office behind her.
Well, I think I've been completely exonerated over these matters, and I am happy to move on from it. I think too that one of the things that you learn in life is you learn from things that go wrong. And I've learned an awful lot. And I know this, I would not be here still in the job and putting in every effort that I possibly can if I didn't believe that I was adding value.
The Labour leader Andrew Little says tensions have been simmering in National for a while and the lid has now blown off.
We know between Judith Collins, Paula Bennett, Jonathan Coleman to an extent, possibly Amy Adams, we know that those tensions are there. We know that backbenchers are variously happy and unhappy with kind of whoever's around. The lid's been blown off that now, so a lot of that stuff will bubble to the surface.
Bill English already has the public backing of 8 ministers, including Nikki Kay, who briefly reappeared at Parliament today. Ms Kay is undergoing treatment for breast cancer and says she wanted to be at the caucus meeting for the discussion on a new party leader. She says she also wants to acknowledge John Key and the support he's given her.
I don't want to cry, but he has been an incredible rock during this period. So has obviously the Deputy Prime Minister and the caucus, and to all of those people who get cancer, and particularly breast cancer sufferers out there. I just want to acknowledge the courage that they have and to say that I could not have more support from my caucus during this period.
National Party MPs will meet again on Monday to vote for their new leader. Atu i te whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi ko Chris Bramwell.
Let's change subject and go to Kaikoura, where dairy farmers are celebrating being able to truck their milk out of the district for the first time since the quakes. Obviously, limited access to the region has meant milk has had to be dumped on paddocks. Today, the second convoy of milk tankers has made its way through via the inland route as part of what will be a daily service for farmers keen to get their milk to market. Conan Young reports.
The milk trucks are once again a regular sight at Kaikoura's 22 dairy farms and are making the twice daily journey over the inland route so farmers can once again turn $1 from milking their cows. Farmer Simon Mackle says not having to dump the milk on his paddocks is a relief.
My cows were grazing a milk paddock last night and I couldn't leave them in the paddock because they were unsettled. And I didn't want them to sit down because they could possibly get mastitis from the milk, if you know. So we had to shift them. So, we wouldn't want to have a whole farm like that,
Simon Mackle says 3 weeks worth of milk being spread across his paddocks has taken its toll on his grass as well.
Definitely. There's a couple of paddocks that we'll have to regrass. And where we've had the dilution rates being better, we'll just, the cows will just have to chew through it.
But while the milk can now get out, difficulties remain in getting supplies in.
I've just been talking to the local stock carrier, Bruce Ingram, and he's just having great difficulty trying to work out how he's going to get down and get fertiliser. you know, because he can't, it's a 2-day operation at the moment because of the way the road is. He needs to be able to go out early and come back late, you know, and same as stock trucks and whatever. So it is a problem. We all need to get fertiliser on now to grow grass.
While Simon Mackle managed to repair the quake damage to his milking shed quickly, others haven't been so lucky. Mark Hislop's milking silo held up in the days following the quake, but eventually had to come down.
Well, after the quake, it had a wee bit of a lean on, and I wasn't too concerned about it because there was so much else going on. But over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, all the aftershocks, you could just see it starting to tilt a little bit more, and then we had personnel come up from Fonterra from Clandyboy, and they were going around all the farms, and when they got here they were pretty concerned about the angle of the silo, and even in the afternoon that they were here, within 2 or 3 hours with the aftershocks you could see it actually going over a bit more.
The shaking, which Mark Hislop describes as being unlike anything he's ever experienced before, also damaged his shed.
There's been severe cracking all around the platform and in the yard. I mean, the first day after the quake, the cows spooked coming into the yard because there's big fissures in the concrete that we ended up actually just filling with coarse shingle that would pack in, just so that they weren't spooking at it.
The shed has now been declared a write-off, forcing cows from the farm to be milked on an adjoining farm owned by the Hislops until at least next year. Mark Hislop says at the moment it's a case of taking one day at a time. In Kaikoura for Checkpoint, ko Conan Young tēnei.
6:14, a Māori MP has criticised fellow parliamentarians for what she says is a heartbreaking lack of interest in the process of addressing historical injustices. And another is challenging MPs to lift their game. Last week, 3 iwi groups travelled from Taranaki to Parliament to hear their treaty settlement bills being read, but found very few politicians had made the effort to be in the House. Our Māori Issues correspondent Mihi Narangi Forbes reports.
Ngā Ruahine, Te Atiawa and Taranaki iwi have waited more than 150 years for treaty breaches against them to be addressed. In Parliament, a full public gallery listened on as the Treaty Minister Chris Finlayson retold their story.
Before 1860, Ngā Ruahine were thriving, they were economically successful, and they retained ownership of their lands and resources. By 1865, every acre of the Ngā Ruahine rohe had been indiscriminately and unjustly confiscated by the Crown.
Mr Finlayson went on to describe the events of the Parihaka invasion as some of the gravest moments in the country's history. Labour's Nanaia Mahuta was reduced to tears.
The raupatu was indiscriminate, unjust and unconscionable. The Crown deeply regrets the serious damage its actions have caused to Ngā Ruahine and its people.
The Māori Party co-leader Marama Fox described what happened to those arrested at Parihaka in 1881.
When your people were convicted, tortured, ferried away, enslaved, killed.
And your co-leader, Te Ururo Flavel, spoke about how he felt visiting the area.
I was taken aback by, I suppose, almost a depression. And I never got to grips with it until I actually understood that when you have your land taken from you, you're bound to be depressed. You're bound to be angry.
RNZ asked each political party how many MPs attended the settlement readings last week. The Māori Party had both of its MPs in the House. Labour says it had a minimum of 5 to 6, which appears to have been the party's Māori caucus. New Zealand First had 3 MPs, and the Green Party no more than 3 at any one time, with National not supplying their numbers. Marama Fox says at the very least, MPs should turn up and learn the historic treaty breaches.
They've been waiting 150 years for this to come to this point, to address the injustice. And when they come and sit in front of the government is absent. It's heartbreaking.
Many MPs are attending select committees while treaty settlements are being heard in the House, but Marama Fox says the committees don't have to sit during the readings, it's a choice.
When we go into urgency, all the other select committees stop so that you can be in the House to debate this stuff. And then we get the treaty bills and we go into urgency and all the other select committees carry on because they don't value it, don't deem it important to be there. think, oh, this is a Maori thing, so we'll leave them to it.
Tomorrow, another 3 iwi will arrive at Parliament to have their bills read. Labour's Peeni Herari says he'll be there, and he's challenging other MPs to come in numbers. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko mihi Ngarangi Forbes ahau.
As Nat after Nat puts their hat in the ring for the party leadership contest and, of course, also for the position of Prime Minister, establishment politics are being knocked to the ropes in some parts of the world. Trump over Clinton in the USA, with barely half of eligible Americans voting. Brexit in Britain. And the Mount Roskill by-election, in which only 16,000 people voted, less than half the turnout in the general election. Are establishment politicians connecting with people for whom the establishment is a distant land? To find out and to understand why people voted the way they did in Mount Roskill and why so many people didn't vote, I went there for a morning rush hour walk. What's your first name?
Melody.
What's your first name?
Joe.
My first name's Hope.
What's your first name?
Mona.
Nice to meet you, Mona. Melody, Jock, Hope and Mona belong to an electorate in which roughly half the people living here were born in another country. If politics is tribal, and I met Kate, who joyfully offered an example of that.
I voted for Michael Wood.
Why did you vote for Michael Wood?
Labour supporter since before I was born.
What about people with no received tribe? New Zealanders who did not grow up with National Mum and Labour Dad, to steal that famous line from Baxter. I have wandered into the TVS Superettes. We're on the corner of Sandringham Road and Mount Albert Road. Yes. And I'm with Satwant and Baminda, who Satwant and Baminda sing. And this is your place, is it?
Yes. Yes.
And did you vote in the by-election?
Yes.
And can I ask who you voted for?
Labour.
The Sings run the kind of superette or dairy that few neighbourhoods in New Zealand don't have on a corner somewhere. Small sales, single items, a can of drink, a packet of cigarettes, lollies. There's a countdown and a new world within a few hundred metres, so no one does their grocery shopping at TVS. And to get by, they work long hours. But that's not enough.
It's now getting harder. Everything going up, like expensive, everything's.
An hour and a half after I left the superette, when I'd spoken to more people and called a cab to get to work, I got a most unexpected driver. Baminda, who I was speaking to at the TVS Superette, has turned up as my cab driver. I had no idea. How are you, Baminda?
I'm good, thank you.
And so, your wife, Satwant, she runs the Superette?
Yes, Satwant Ko, yes.
And you drive a cab?
Yes, I'm driving cab.
And how many hours a day is the Superette open?
That's the Superette open 7 to 9:30 or 10 p.m.
So 14 or 15 hours a day?
Yes. Yeah, 14, 15 hours a day.
One in the Superette, one in the cab. It didn't used to be that way. At first the Superette could pay the bills, but margins have been squeezed by the supermarkets. Money is tight in their neighbourhood and costs have risen.
Bills or rates, everything going up. Much harder to survive, look at, yeah.
Much harder to survive?
Yes. That's why we're doing hard work and I'm driving taxi as well.
So the Superette is open 7 days a week, 14 or 15 hours a day, and to get by you have to drive a taxi as well?
Yes.
Satwant and Baminda voted Labour because money in their community is so tight, and accommodation is the sponge soaking so much of it up. They hope Labour will address that. But, and here's the but as addressed by Melody, whilst she liked the man, Michael Wood, the broader Labour Party itself, well, a little less. What is it about Michael Wood that appeals to you?
He was in the community. A couple of his representatives contacted me. I went to a church service. He showed up. He fully participated. So I guess I wanted to vote for him because he was present. I didn't really see much from National. So, yeah, that's why I wanted to vote for him.
So, is that an expression of confidence in the man or the party or both?
The man, I kind of got put off Labour from previous leadership, but I guess, yeah, he's kind of brought my confidence back in Labour. They've got a long way to go, but yeah, just him.
Michael Wood was present. That's the word Melody used, present. And there was a sense amongst the people I spoke to that in the end, none of what they normally see from Wellington, from afar, makes much difference. Hope, did you vote?
No, I never voted. I don't think any of my friends voted either.
Hope was walking to work. How old are you?
I'm 22.
I met Hope at the crossing on Albert and Sandringham, the sun streaming down on us, and I joined her. What do politics and politicians mean to her? Do you care about politics?
Probably like 6 out of 10. Not really. I do care. How can I put this? To be honest, no, not really.
Hope is 22. Jock is a couple of generations older. And in almost 2 hours of walking and talking, he was the only other Pākehā person I met. Did you vote?
Yes.
And do you mind if I ask who for?
National.
And so why did you vote National? Because you're in the minority in this electorate, right?
Yeah, well, that's right, yes, yeah. Well, when you look at Labor, they're going nowhere. And National has run the country pretty good, so why not support someone that's doing a good job?
Jock is tribal. National is his party. Have you ever voted Labor?
No.
The old tribes, but will they mean less and less? Half the electorate born overseas, a sense that life is pretty tough and establishment politics doesn't help much. Like the Sings, you just have to work longer, and even then, will that be enough? I'm right on the very edge of the electorate now. I've come to a gas station. I've just met Carla, who's about to gas up. How are you, Carla?
I'm very good, thank you. It's so nice to meet you today.
It's lovely to meet you. Did you vote in the by-election?
I did.
Who'd you vote for?
I voted for Labor.
Why?
It's a tricky question because I've been disappointed with them over the last couple of years, but I think they represent my values more. I'm really about people and families and building communities, and so, I'd like to see Labor come through again, get strong again.
How's life? Are you getting by?
We are. I mean, it's tough in Auckland. Auckland's quite expensive, but we work hard, we get by good.
Do you own a home?
We're in a family home. So we don't own a home. I don't know if we could own a home in Auckland. That's the debate that we have at the moment, looking at other areas to live in other than Auckland.
How old are you? That's a rude question, isn't it? I'll tell you, I'm 52.
I'm 42.
Right, well, it's 10 years younger. And so at 42, you've kind of given up hope of owning a home in Auckland.
I have, sadly. I really have. I love Auckland, but no, we can't afford to buy here. So we'll be looking in other areas, definitely.
And you said before you work hard. You said we work hard. So is there more than one worker in your household?
My husband and I, yes, yeah. So.
And so you both work?
We do, yeah.
Good jobs?
I think very well paid jobs. I really do. In anywhere else in Auckland, I think we'd be really thriving. But we're doing okay. Yeah, we're doing okay. But anywhere else in New Zealand, I think we'd be doing really well on the wage that we get together.
So what do you want from your government?
I just really want them to really look at the housing problem in Auckland, really take it seriously, really look at it, and just to help families to stay here. I mean, I love Auckland, but we can't afford to live here. That's my big thing, is just really looking at the housing in Auckland.
Carla is thinking of leaving Auckland. 2 jobs, good household income, not enough. I call a cab and get Baminda. Sawant is in the superette, 3 hours into a 14-hour day, and Baminda is driving. He came to New Zealand almost 30 years ago. He's a Kiwi now. This is his home. But life is tougher than it was.
Much harder to survive, look at, yeah.
Much harder to survive?
Yes. That's why we're doing hard work, and I'm driving taxi as well.
The people of the Mount Roskill electorate who voted for Michael Wood on Saturday in the by-election, talking about what they hoped for, why they did vote, why they didn't vote, and I sensed a great sad disconnection from mainstream politics. Although they like Michael Wood very much as a man, there's much less faith in the existing two-party structure that people like me grew up with. It was fascinating to spend a morning in their company, and I'd like to thank everyone who spoke to me. It's 27 minutes past 6. I'd also like to thank everyone who sent in feedback tonight, and a lot of it And a lot of your feedback around the leadership is pretty supportive of Bill English. Here's a good example. Dear John, I rate my political choices on a kindness index. So far, here are my ratings on the field. Bill English, 7 out of 10. Jonathan Coleman, 5 out of 10. Judith Collins, 2 out of 10. Paula Bennett, who of course hasn't put her hat in the ring, not yet anyway, 3 out of 10. Hi John, I'm not a National voter, but I'm hoping for a strong leader that can hold on to National's majority, as I absolutely dread the thought of Winston Peters being kingmaker next election. I would rather see National do a 4th term than I'd rather see National not do a 4th term, I think this person means, than see Winston holding any power. He would be destructive and divisive, legitimise racism, and worst of all, he's anti-1080, says Lisa. The reason Lisa's responding to that is I asked Judith Collins, I didn't actually ask the other two, but Judith Collins said that Winston Peters was effectively the leader of the opposition and she needed to take him on. She also said, though, if working with Winston Peters was required to get National a 4th term, it was important enough for National to have that 4th term for her to consider working with Winston Peters and potentially to give him a senior position in Cabinet. She did say that on the record. Vote Bill English, says this person, keeping it real since 1990. We have to say that the feedback we are getting tonight is strongly in favour of Bill English. But for reasons I think that you don't like the other candidates that much. Not English, this person says. Pippa says, great as finance man but not as PM, need new blood, but Coleman too bland and hasn't had wide enough experience. Matthew Hooden suggesting we may see other people throwing their hats into the ring between now and next Monday when this decision will be made. The sort of names that are being discussed: Amy Adams, Simon Bridges, potentially Paula Bennett, Stephen Joyce, possibly not, I hear on the grapevine. But who knows? One final piece of feedback that Pip has just passed in. John, listening to the report about the poor turnout of MPs for the settlement reading brings up, I think, a matter which has long been ignored. How few MPs are in the House after scheduled question time. They all disappear in droves while business still goes on there. I'm disgusted at them, really. Part of me thinks they must be doing something else important, and another part thinks they're just swanning off with mates somewhere or just going home while important business is still happening. This is the main reason I have less time for MPs than I would like to have, regardless of how hard they reckon they work. Thank you, Martin, and thank you for all your feedback. We love hearing from you. We will be back tomorrow night at 5. Until then, a very good evening indeed.
RNZ headlines now at 6:30. The Deputy Prime Minister, Bill English, says he will provide stable and effective government if he becomes Prime Minister. Scientists say they now have evidence that 9 faults ruptured in the Kaikoura earthquake. The Grey District Mayor is calling on Solid Energy to stop permanent sealing of the Pike River mine before it's too late. Tougher restrictions on recreational and commercial fishing in the Hauraki Gulf are proposed in a new plan being unveiled in Auckland tonight. And in sports, spinner Mitchell Santner is the only New Zealand bowler to claim a wicket as the Australian cricketers have raced away to 150 for 1 after 28 overs in their second one-day international in Canberra. Our next news and weather is at 7.
In 2014, Kate Bush performed her first concerts in 35 years. I'm Nick Bollinger and I'll be reviewing a 3-disc document of those concerts in the sampler.